Hey, welcome back to the Lakeside View project. Today we'll be painting our Lakeside View with watercolors. I'm sure each of you has used them once or twice in your life. I'll give you a few tips today for how to use them properly. Remember, in this project we had a large sailboat up here in the front very close to us, and some others that are not miniatures, but in fact they're farther away from us. So we can see all the way to the other shoreline, hills, and some sky near the top of the paper. I'm going to slide this aside and talk just about the paint set for a moment. You should each have a cup of water with you. And one of the first things you must do when using watercolors is to prepare your paint set. So what I'm doing right now is with a wet brush, I'm just dropping off a little color on, a little water on each color. And I'm going to do that again just so they're really ready to work for me. So with a wet brush, again, I'm sort of swiping on the corner there to get my set ready to work. With that water sitting on top of the paint set, sitting on top of the pigments, my water will now turn into paint. So if I slide this over, one thing you need to constantly be aware of in your paint set as well before I begin is your paint set continually wet throughout your painting process, as well as your brush. If at any point you feel like your brush is no longer wet and flowing smoothly on the paper, then you're not really doing watercolor paints anymore, so you need to go back and add more water. Same with your paint set. If at any point you feel like it's getting a little bit dry in there, you want to stop. So remember throughout, wet paint set and wet brush. So I'm going to start with my front sailboat here, and what I'm going to do is just pick a color for what I'm doing is I have a wet brush. I'm just slightly moving around my red paint set area, my little square of red in there, and I'm going to paint the boat portion of my sailboat red. Going back for more, one thing I want to caution you against today is if you have too much water on your paper and it just gets too saturated, it will take too long to dry. Sometimes it will bleed over into other areas, so just be cautious that you're not adding too much water. At no point should you have a big puddle of water on your paper. Rinsing before going to another color here. I think I'm going to do the sails of this boat in yellow. So even though I've got stripes on there, I'm going right over top of that with my yellow. Again, wet paint set, wet brush. And one other tip that I want to make you aware of is that as you paint this artwork, I want you to be aware of which spots on your paper are wet and which ones are drying. What we would not want to do is paint the boat there at the bottom and then immediately start painting the blue water right beside it. I'm sure in your mind you can guess what would happen if we brought that wet blue paint right up against the yellow paint. So again, be aware of what is still drying, what is already dry, so that you are knowing what parts of your artwork can be painted right next to each other and what you have to wait a little longer for. So I've got my violet here. I'm going to paint this boat violet. And then when I'm done with the violet over here, I'm going to do orange sails on this sailboat. And I'm actually going to skip showing you my smallest sailboats just to save time so that you've got enough time to truly do this artwork. And also, please know I'm going to show you how to paint the water now, as well as the hills and sky, But I'm not going to do the whole thing just to save time for you there in the classroom and to make sure you've got enough time. So I'm going to go into my blue now. With a little touch here, I can tell that my red boat is dry. So now I can bring that blue right up against there without worrying that those colors are going to bleed together. But I'm not going to go up to my yellow sails yet because I don't believe that they're dry yet. So since my red is dry, I'm going to be able to paint down here. Again, do you notice that my brush is just nicely, smoothly flowing at all times here? I'm not saturating the paper. I don't have a big wet mess here. One way to show that you care about your work is to show nice edges in your painting, so where two colors come together. For example, my red and my blue. I'm going to try to show a nice neat edge there. So again, when you're painting your water, just be aware what is still drying, what can you get close to, and what do you need to wait on until it's dry. We can do our shoreline back here in green to represent that these hills are in fact green growth. Back here on the other side of the shore, going to neatly go around my little flag on top of my sailboat because I'm not sure what color I'm going to use there yet. So using just the tip of your brush will allow you to do a little detail work there. Did you notice that? Sometimes I'm using my entire brush, but sometimes if I need a little detail work, I can use just the tip there to do something a little more careful. And finally, you'll probably be bringing blue back into the top of the artwork to show your sky, an orange or yellow sun perhaps. Make sure you let that dry before you bring the next color in beside it. And I hope you enjoy using the watercolor paints today. Again, making sure that your paint set and your brush are continually wet. Wet paint set and wet brush is our rule today. If you don't have those two things wet, then really you aren't doing watercolor paints. So I noticed that my green wasn't quite dry yet. I'm not going to go too close to that edge. That is what you need to be careful about today. And again, I'm not going to do the entire work in front of you today. I will be allowing you some time to finish there in the classroom and to get started. I hope you enjoy this. Take care.